Good morning, Steve, Gary, Ian, Rick. We are about to begin one of the fundamental parts of the Gemara Shabbos, which discusses what is a malacha that is prohibited on Shabbos, and how that malacha must be done, and what is the chiyuv chatas, the obligation to bring a sin offering, which is dependent on the individual malacha, and defining what each malacha, what each prohibited creative work is. So, introduction that we need for this parak is that the Gemara, the Torah tells us in Parshas Vayikra, the beginning of the concept of karbanos, of the offerings in the Beis Hamikdash. The Torah says that if somebody did one of the prohibitions, one of the mitzvahs of the Torah that were not to be done, somebody did them, v'ne'elam mimenu, and it became unbeknownst to them, so it became covered or hidden or unaware to them, and then after they did it, it became known to them that they did that sin. The Torah says they have to bring a sin offering, and as we saw in the Gemara at the Gemara in Zvachim and elsewhere, we saw that this obligation is anything that has to do with that the Torah gives a kares for an intentional sin. Anytime there's a kares for an intentional sin, there's going to be there's going to be a chatas for an unintentional sin. Now, the Gemara is going to tell us that when it comes to Shabbos, there are multiple unintentionalities, if you would, that could be known. That it could be a factor. As we see, the Torah says that it was unbeknownst to them. What was unbeknownst? It could be the entire concept of a prohibition of work on Shabbos. That Shabbos exists as a concept, whether it exists in the Torah. They know Shabbos a concept. They didn't know that it's in the Torah, or they know that Shabbos exists as a concept in its positive commandments, but not that there are negative commandments, that there are prohibitions. Either way, that would be a concept of not knowing Shabbos, and then there's all of Shabbos is combined. The second is where they know of Shabbos, but they forgot that which day was Shabbos, that this day was Shabbos. So they blew through a Shabbos not knowing that day was Shabbos. They forgot. They forgot Saturday is Shabbos. The third is that they know it's Shabbos and they know which day is Shabbos. But what they didn't know was that this particular work or action is a prohibited work. We'll see that there are three different concepts as to three different structures as to what they're obligated in the chatas. Another concept that we need to understand is that we're going to see the concept of avos and toldos, primary and secondary, or avos, parent and descendant or children malachas. So within a category of a malacha, you have the primary malacha, and you can have the secondary malacha being a malacha that is of the same nature, does the same work, but is prohibited since it is something that is within the same category, but not the primary one of that category. So you can have, let's say, for instance, putting a seed in the ground is the principal planting malacha. Watering that can be a secondary or an example of the same kind of action. You're planting, you're growing the seed, but one is the actual seeding, and the other is making sure that the seed grows well. And so that would be a tolda, a secondary malacha within that. And this is relevant because you could only be obligated for one principal amount, one principal action, even if you do multiple actions within that. So if somebody planted and watered on Shabbos, that counts as one malacha. Whereas if somebody did one chatas, one sin offering obligation, where if somebody plowed, tilled the ground and then seeded, the planting, the sowing of that seed is going to be a second malacha to the tilling of the ground, and there will be two chatases for that. So now with that, with that introduction, let's see the Mishnah. Kollel gadol amru b'Shabbos. It was a great principle told in Shabbos, and the Gemara is going to ask, why is this called a more than just a principle? It's a kollel gadol, and why don't we see such a term elsewhere? So kollel gadol amru b'Shabbos kol shacheach ikar Shabbos. Somebody forgets the principal concept of Shabbos. As we said, either they forget that it's in the Torah or that there are prohibitions. And therefore, as a result of that, did many different prohibited works on many different Shabboses. Nevertheless, is only going to be obligated in one single chatas offering, because it's all one ha'alama. That's a term that the Gemara is going to use. Ha'alama is the one forgetfulness, or the one unbeknownstness. I know it's not an English word, but that's the concept of
lapse.
Well, it's not. The term ha'alama doesn't mean a lapse. It is one lapse of knowledge, but the ha'alama is the unbeknownstness, the one covering, one forgetfulness. So the single ha'alama is not not knowing Shabbos, not knowing the principal concept that there are prohibited work on Shabbos from the Torah, and so that is a single ha'alama, and as such, there's one chatas to be brought, even though there are many different Shabboses, meaning many Saturdays, many days of Shabbos, and many malachas, many prohibited works that were done. Hayodea ikar Shabbos. However, if somebody knows the principle of Shabbos, they know that there are prohibited works on Shabbos from the Torah. However, they forgot. Did many different prohibited works, and many different Shabboses. So chayav on kol Shabbos or Shabbos. So here, what this person forgot was that this was Shabbos. They know Shabbos is prohibited. They simply didn't know that this day was Shabbos. So then they're going to be obligated for each Shabbos separately. So every Shabbos, they're going to be obligated for a chatas offering, not per act within the Shabbos, prohibited act within the Shabbos, but for each Shabbos, because there the ha'alama is Shabbos. The ha'alama is that particular day that they missed. Now Rashi points out, as I mentioned before, the Torah says, in order to become obligated, it has to be known to you that that the transgression was done. And over here, there was no knowledge between one Shabbos and the next. So therefore, that too should be one ha'alama. It should be one all the Shabboses that they forgot should be one consistent Shabbos, one single ha'alama, one forgetfulness, one lapse of Shabbos. So Rashi says there are 6 days of the week. You know one of them is Shabbos, and you went through an entire week. Somewhere in the middle of that, it's considered that you knew Shabbos passed and didn't do anything for it. So that would be a single. And that's what breaks it up, because you know somewhere in the week Shabbos has passed and I didn't do anything for it, or I transgressed the prohibitions.
Is Tinok Shanishba part of this sugya, or is
So
it?
that's exactly what the Gemara is going to tell us, is who's this guy that doesn't know the concept of Shabbos at all. The third case of the Mishnah is Ayudea Shu Shabbos. Somebody knows the concept of Shabbos, that the Torah prohibits particular works on Shabbos, and knows that today is Shabbos. They wake up in the morning, they know, oh my goodness, it's a beautiful day, it's Shabbos. And nevertheless, Asa Malachas Harbe B'Shabbos Harbe, and over many weeks did prohibited works on Shabbos, meaning they didn't know that cooking was prohibited on Shabbos, and they didn't know that that kneading a dough was prohibited on Shabbos, and so they did all this stuff, not realizing that they were transgressing over many weeks. So they're obligated for each and every principal prohibited act. We're now on Samach Ches Amud Beis 68. However, if there were many different prohibited works that are similar to the one work, they're only obligated in one. Like I said, watering the plant. So one Shabbos, they planted that seed and then watered it, and then watered it, and then watered it. That's still going to be the one chatas, because it's all part of the one principle of the 39 prohibited acts. It's one principle prohibition, even though that there are different types of acts, but they are all of the same principle. It's only chayv one chatas. Then we're going to see plenty about that. But now the Gemara is going to analyze what is this term, klal gadol, this great principle. What's the great principle? My time a ton of klal gadol. So why do we say that it's a great principle? Is it because there's another principle that we're going to learn in a later Mishnah? Well, tan klal gadol, and therefore it says this one is the great principle. V'gabe shvius, and similar in regards to the prohibition of the 7th year of leaving, where the obligation is to leave your land fallow. V'gabe shvius nami mishum dekabayla misni. And there too it says a great principle, because there's a secondary principle as well, a second principle that it teaches. Tana Klal Gadol, that's why it says a primary principle, a great principle of Hagabi Meiser. What about tithes? The Ktani Klal Acher, where also there are two principles taught in the first Mishnah and a later Mishnah. Tana Klal Gadol, and doesn't say it's a great principle, so that can't be the reason, because there are three places that it says a principle of the rules. So in regards to Shabbos over here, we have the principle that there's the primary forgetfulness and how to break down what chatas it is. In regards to the Shemitah year, where it says that anything that is food, the great principle is anything that is food for humans and animals, that doesn't last throughout the year, that at some point there's nothing left in the field, is going to be prohibited to plant and grow and maintain in the Shemitah year. And in regards to the tithe, we'll see as well the principles. Amar Rabbi Yossi Barabin, Shabbos and Shvisa Isbu Abbas. No, Shabbos and Shemitah have principal and secondary prohibitions. So that's why it says it's a klal gadol, a great principle. Why is this a great principle? Because you have the 39 primary malachos that are prohibited, and each one of those have secondary or told us things that are within the same category, but they're not the exact same work, like we just said, sowing a seed and watering that seed. So Shemitah also has that. Shemitah has that you have the principle like harvesting in the field, and which are going to be the principal, and the secondary. Tana Gadol, Maisa, the last bit officer told us, but tithing, which doesn't have a primary and a secondary principle, it doesn't say that for. Tana Kla Gadol, so it doesn't say a great principle. The Gemara says, what about El Bakapara, the Tana Kla Gadol? But Bakapara actually has the text of the Mishnah by tithing also that it is a great principle. Well, then, the Maisa, my office of my told us, it can't be that it's on account of that there are principal prohibitions and secondary prohibitions, because by tithing, he said there is no such thing. So rather, this is the reason that it's called primary and secondary principles. Gadol because the punishment of Shabbos is greater than Shemitah, than the seventh year, and therefore it says it's a great principle. The Ilu Shabbos Isa bein betalish bein mechuba, because we see that the prohibition of Shabbos is not only in something that's attached to the ground; it's even in things that are already detached. As we know, I mean, kindling a fire is not attached to the ground necessarily. We have many the other malachas like weaving, not attached to the ground. The ilu shviyas betalish, whereas the Shemitah year, all is prohibited based on something attached to the ground. And betalish lesa b'mechuber isa, and therefore it's only by something attached to the ground and not by something that's already detached. The gadol anshesh shviyas yasem min ha'ma'aser, and the prohibition of Shemitah is greater than the tithes. The ilu shviyas isa be'ema machal adam be'ema machal behema. The Shemitah prohibition of the seventh year being fallow is regardless of whether the grains being grown or the produce being grown in the ground is for animal feed or for human consumption. Whereas but the tithing of produce is only pertains to produce that's human food and not for animal feed. And when it says al-baka para the tanik la'agad b'maiser, and what is the reason then the Bar Kapara learns that it has the text of tithing by tithing also that there's a klal gadol, a great principle. Because the punishment or the prohibition of the tithing, the obligation of the tithing, and the prohibition of consuming food prior to tithing is greater than the obligation of payah. The ilu meiser by tithing, isa b'te'ena v'yerek, it applies even to figs. As we'll see, the reason figs, the uniqueness of figs is that it doesn't have a single harvest time. It continues to grow in batches, v'yerek, and greens which don't last. The ilu peya leisa b'teina v'yerek, and peya, they leaving the corner of your field for the poor, that only applies to a specific set of produce, which excludes figs and greens. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Kolel Amar b'peya, there's a principle that's said about peya, about the leaving the corner of the field for the poor. Kol shu oichel, anything that is food, v'nishmar, and can be guarded, meaning it can be kept for the winter season. V'gedulam min haaretz, and it grows from the ground, meaning it actually takes root within the ground. Ulikitase ka'achas, and it has a single harvest. Machnisa l'kiyum, and you keep it for this winter season. Before when we said v'nishmar means it's something that's guarded, not an open field that's free for all. It's a guarded field, and here machnisa l'kiyum, and it's something that you would put it into your silo and you keep it for the winter months. So that chayav peya, that's obligated in peya, leaving your field, the corner of the field for the poor. That's obligated in peya. And the Mishnah Mishnah is explained like this: Ochel, this that it says that it has to be food. That's to exclude the safiach is the aftergrowth, that which you didn't plant it, it grows on its own the next season from seeds that fell. So these two plants, stis and kotza, it doesn't grow well when it grows by itself, and it can only be used for dye. It cannot be used for food, and therefore Shemitah does not apply to it because it's not. Peah does not apply to it because you don't have to leave the corner of the field because it's not going to be edible for human consumption. Menishmar, and it's a guarded field, lemiyute hefker, as opposed to hefker, which is when the field is left unguarded. Since it's unguarded, it doesn't count as your field because anybody can come and take, and therefore you don't have to leave to the poor. Essentially, the entire thing is for the poor. And it grows from the ground. It takes root in the ground. As opposed to mushrooms and truffles. These are things that don't really grow from the ground. They grow on the ground, but they don't grow from the ground. It's moisture. It's a fungus, and therefore it doesn't take root in the ground, and it doesn't count as you're not obligated in leaving the corner of the field of that. And it's harvested as one. Excluding figs, because figs, as we said, they don't have a single harvest. Some of them are ripe now, and then you can continue to have produce throughout the summer. I know that in the Northwest it's usually not that way, but in Israel it continues to grow throughout the season. And you bring it into you bring it into harvest and to save. Besides, which excludes greens that you can't really keep. So all these are exempt in Peah, and whereas Ve'ilu Gabi Meiser, by tithes, Tanam we learned Kolel Amr b'Meiser. There's a principle in regards to tithing. Kol shu eicher, anything that's edible, v'nishmar, and is a guarded field. V'gedulim in aretz, and it grows from the ground. Chai b'Meiser. Those are the requirements for tithing. V'ilu l'kitasik achas, but it does not have the requirement of being harvested as one, a single harvest, meaning that even figs are included. And we also didn't learn that it needs to be something that you can put in the silo and keep for the winter. So even greens will be included in tithing. So since tithing has a greater principle and a greater obligation than Peah, therefore, according to Bar Kapara, that too has the term Klal Gadol, a great principle. So the Gemara essentially says that the term great principle here is coming to tell us that it is a greater obligation than some of the other principles that have obligations. So now to the concept of the Mishnah. The concept of Mishnah is talking about someone who doesn't know of the primary concept of the obligation of Shabbos. So we're going to encounter a discussion here on how to interpret the concept of ha'alama. We said there was one ha'alama, meaning where it was covered, it was hidden, it was a certain forgetfulness in regards to a prohibition. What about someone who never knew of it? Is that ha'alama or not? Does that count as as Michael said, the term a lapse? There's no lapse in not having ever known. Does that count as a ha'alama or not? So that's we're going to see in the Gemara. Now, just to remember, because for the next part of the Gemara, we need to remember the distinction the Mishnah said. The first it said was, if someone didn't know the principal concept of Shabbos at all, that there are prohibitions from the Torah and Shabbos, that would be one single chatas for all of the Shabbos and all the prohibitions within the Shabbos that they've done. And the second level was someone who knows the principal prohibition of Shabbos and knows that certain things are prohibited on Shabbos, but forgot this day is Shabbos, and for multiple Shabbos they forgot that it is Shabbos and prohibited. They will bring a chatas for each Shabbos. The third category was someone who knew the principle of prohibition of Shabbos and knew that today was Shabbos, but they forgot the particular act that they were doing was included in the prohibitions of Shabbos, or they never knew it. So those are then they would bring a chatas for each one, as long as they are separate principal prohibitions of the 39 principal malachas. So Rav and Shmuel Damar Tavayu. So in the first version of the quote of Rav and Shmuel, they say, it is talking about a child who was raised amongst non-Jews and never heard of the principle of Shabbos at all. Or someone who converted, and even though they went to Beis Din and they went to the mikveh, they were told about many concepts of Torah, and they were told the prohibitions of Torah, but it was neglected to tell them, by the way, there's a concept of Shabbos, and that you have a principle, you have prohibitions on Shabbos, and so they don't know. But this version of Rabbi Shmuel says, but if they knew, and then they forgot, Shabbos of Shabbos. So then they knew the concept of Shabbos. So each particular Shabbos is a separate forgetfulness, and therefore each Shabbos is going to require its own chatas offering, its own korban chatas. And the reason is because each Shabbos counts as independently having been forgotten. This week you forgot, and the next week you forgot, and the next week you forgot. So each one is a separate chatas. Tanan. Well, in our mission, it says, it says he forgot the principle of Shabbos, meaning he once knew. How can you tell me it's someone who never knew? Our mission is, the term the Mishnah uses is hashocheach, someone who forgot. Wouldn't that indicate that he had a knowledge and then forgot it? Look, what does it mean when it says that he forgot the principle of Shabbos? That it was, and this is a term that you can use in Hebrew, it doesn't really work in English, that it was forgotten from him, meaning it was forgotten from teaching him. He never had the concept to begin with. He never had that knowledge. It was made forgotten from him, so he never had the knowledge. So
I mean, the Hilchas Shabbos are very complicated. So a person could know it's Shabbos and could know kind of some like basic, rudimentary concepts of Shabbos, but there's so much complexity and there's so much, keeping Shabbos is really, it's a study in and of itself. You have to really, I could imagine. I'm just saying. I could imagine a lot of people who they basically know it's Shabbos. They basically know some basic laws of Shabbos. You can't turn on lights. Okay, you can't turn on lights. But other things that are maybe not so obvious, maybe more subtle. Never heard of that. They didn't go to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. You're saying is that within the 39 malachas and their secondary prohibitions, there are many that people will say, "Oh, I never knew that that's prohibited," simply because it doesn't come up that much. And so I think you're absolutely right. There are Torah prohibitions on Shabbos that many people don't know about, and never knew. And that really is the discussion here. Is a chatas offering only if somebody knew and forgot, or is it even if somebody, or primarily if somebody never knew? So Rabbi Shmuel is saying that our Mishnah is talking about, particularly if you never knew, which indicates that if you did know, and that's what the Gemara is about to ask. So what you're telling me is that if he did know about it and then it just simply forgot, then it's considered a chatas for each Shabbos in and of itself. Well, then let's look at the next line of the Mishnah and see if that fits. So what you're telling me is that if he knew once that there is a principal prohibition of Shabbos, so this person converted, the Beis Din told him, there's a thing of Shabbos, there's certain prohibitions you're not allowed to do. Maybe they even told him what those prohibitions are, and totally forgot about it. Shabbos, you're telling me there's a sin offering that they have to bring for each particular Shabbos? Well, well, then the next line in the Mishnah that says, oh, if somebody knows of Shabbos, just forgot each particular Saturday that it is Shabbos, they have to bring a sin offering for each one. Well, then why did you jump that far ahead? You should have just said, even if somebody forgot that the principal prohibition of Shabbos, but since they once knew, they have to bring a sin offering for each Shabbos. Adatani, why do you, if you're already teaching this line, Shabbos, and that somebody knows about the principle of Shabbos, but he did multiple prohibited acts on various Shabbos, Shabbos is obligated for each week. Listening, why don't you say your case, Rav and Shmuel, and say that if somebody did not remember that there's a principal prohibition of Shabbos, they didn't remember the concept of Shabbos at all, but they once knew, they would also be obligated, and therefore they'd also be obligated in a carbon for each Shabbos. And I would know for sure that somebody who did this work, the case that the Mishnah said, where he knew of Shabbos and just forgot that this day is the Shabbos day, for sure they'd be obligated in the chatas for each day. Indeed, the Gemara says, yeah, that is what the Mishnah means. According to this version of Rav and Shmuel, we're going to say, yeah, that's what the Mishnah means when it says that somebody knows the principle of Shabbos. It means he once knew Shabbos and he forgot it. It doesn't mean he knows it now. It just means he knows the principle of Shabbos. At some point, the principal concept of Shabbos was something he knew. So the Gemara challenges that as well. And we're now on Samach Chesamid Beis, 68b. Avaloi shachacha, but if he had not forgotten it, what you're saying is that if he remembered the principal concept that you're not allowed to do work on Shabbos, but didn't remember which ones, what act of Shabbos is prohibited. There too, you're saying for each prohibited act of the 39 acts, there's going to be a chatas offering. So why did the next line in the Mishnah say, if he knew of Shabbos and knew today is Shabbos and simply forgot which acts are prohibited or not, there he's going to be obligated for each one of the principal concepts of the 39 malacha. Because he knew that today is Shabbos and knew the principal concept that Shabbos has prohibited work from the Torah. Listening, so then say it that way. Say he knows the concept of Shabbos, but forgets that and knew that today was Shabbos, but forgot that today was Shabbos. He's also going to be obligated for each act. And then again, I'll know the principal amount, the rule that you're saying that each one each action is also going to be chai. So essentially, Rav and Shmuel just added a fourth caveat into this discussion. In our Mishnah, we had somebody knew forgot the principal concept of Shabbos. Somebody forgot today is Shabbos, or somebody knew that Shabbos has prohibitions and knew that today was Shabbos, but forgot that today that this action they're about to do is prohibited on Shabbos. Rav and Shmuel added something and said, if they didn't know, if they never knew, but if they knew and forgot, it pushes it up one level. So then there are 4 levels in the Mishnah, and each one, the Gemara says, so why don't we say the next level? Why did we jump to the next level? Say the same level, meaning they forgot the principle concept that Shabbos has prohibitions, or they forgot that today was Shabbos, and say it since you say the same obligation for someone who never knew, that's where that level is, and somebody who knew but forgot moves it to the next level. So why don't you say that at the next level? Ella, so the Gemara says, so that's not correct. This statement by Rav Shmuel, this version of the statement of Rav Shmuel is not correct. Our Mishnah is talking about where he knew of Shabbos and forgot it, or knew today is Shabbos and forgot it, or knew that this is a prohibited act and forgot it. And the statement of Rav Shmuel is also like somebody who knew and forgot. That means that they knew the concept of Shabbos and forgot it. This is what Rav and Shmuel said. The Amr Tavai, they both said, our Mishnah is not only talking about someone who forgot the Shabbos, which is a simple reading in the Mishnah. That means he once knew of Shabbos and forgot it. Once knew that today is Shabbos and forgot it. But even the same halacha would apply if they never knew. Such as Tinik Shanishba Bein Anachrim. Tinik Shanishba, a child that grew up between non-Jews, meaning they never were told properly that this is a prohibited act on Shabbos, or that there is a concept of prohibited acts on Shabbos. Or somebody converted amongst non-Jews. That too is also like someone who knew and forgot, and is still going to be obligated. So even though it's a lesser degree of indiscretion, and nevertheless, they are obligated in a chatas offering. However, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, they say, it's only if they once knew and forgot. But someone who grew up amongst people that never told him the concept of Shabbos, or told him the concept of Shabbos and never told them that today is Shabbos, or told them that today is Shabbos, but never told them what works, what are the 39 categories of work that's prohibited. But there, such a person is going to be exempt of a chatas offering because they never knew, and therefore you cannot say that there was a ha'alama, a forgetfulness. They never knew, and that's an onus that's going to be essentially under duress by situational duress. They had no idea. How could they avoid something that they never knew was prohibited? As we know, Rav and Shmuel were the heads of the academies in Babylon, and Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish were the heads of the academy, or Rabbi Yochanan was the head of the academy, and Rabbi Yochanan was his primary chavrusa student in Eretz Yisrael. And this is the teaching they had. So Mesaveh,
Rav and Shmuel agree.
Sorry?
Here, Rav and Shmuel agree, and Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan agree.
Correct.
Usually they're Bali Plukta.
Well, they're the ones that would always discuss things with each other because they were the heads of the academy in Bavel and they were the heads of the academy in Eretz Yisrael. So usually the dialogue is between them. Sometimes they agree and the dialogue or the disagreement is between the heads of academy in one country and the heads of the academy in the other country. So and we find this many times in the Gemara.
But here the machlokes is between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel.
Correct.
Not between the two Bali Plukta.
Correct. So Gemara challenges this. Klal Gadol Amar b'Shabbos. This great principle, as we just saw, it was said in Shabbos. And the Brisa adds some text to the Mishnah. Somebody forgets the principal concept of Shabbos and did many prohibitions over various weeks. Is only obligated in one chatas offering. However, they are obligated in a chatas offering because they knew and forgot. Ketzat, what's this? What would be included in this? What cases? That somebody who was raised amongst non-Jews or raised without being taught Shabbos, or a convert that was not taught Shabbos, and therefore they never knew the concept, and they would be obligated in a chatas offering. So this brisa clearly concurs or supports Rav and Shmuel. And the brisa continues, and somebody like this similarly would be obligated in a single chatas offering for all the times that they ate their meat unsalted because they ate the blood, which is prohibited from the Torah, or every time they ate chaylev fats, the prohibited fats, because they didn't know and didn't take it out of the animal that they had shechted, or idolatry. For all the times they did idolatry and didn't know that that was included in idolatry, they'd be obligated one for all the times. So we see that even though that they never knew, they are obligated in a chatas offering, but one for all the times that they did it. Munbaz played it. However, Munbaz says no. This person is going to be exempt. And this is what Munbaz said in front of Rabbi Akiva. He says, look, I think this person should be exempt. Just as someone who was intentional. That means they knew something is prohibited, and they said, even so, I'm going to do it because I want to, or because I don't care, or in situations too hard, whatever it may be. This person knew and transgressed. That's called a mazid, a wanton sin. So he had knowledge, and the shogeg he's called a chote, a sinner. And a shogeg is someone who's unintentional, meaning they didn't know that this hadn't been salted. They didn't know that this was chaylev, the prohibited fats. They didn't know this is prohibited on Shabbos. That's a shogeg. And that's all. And he's also considered a chote, a sinner. Just as someone who was intentional had knowledge, so too someone who was unintentional also had knowledge.
If a person who knew that, a person knows it's, we've learned this, but a person knows it's usher. He knows it's usher to do certain thing on Shabbos, but he doesn't remember that there's skila, and there was no hasra. So is he amazing still? Because he knew it was usher. He just didn't.
Absolutely. Somebody who knew it's prohibited didn't remember what the punishment is, or what the consequences are, or what carbon you have to bring. That's only in based in bringing someone like that to court. That's where the distinction is going to be. But the actual action it's an intentional transgression. The person knew and transgressed anyhow.
So he doesn't bring a chatas for the fact that he didn't know what the oynish was.
Yeah, that's an intentional act. No chatas offering. So Munbaz says before Rabbi Akiva, this is it needs some knowledge in order for it to be considered a sin. Well, if that's the way you're comparing them, I can add to you another point. If you're comparing a wanton sin, a mazid, to an unintentional action, well, why don't we say this? Just as an intentional act had knowledge of the transgression and the prohibition at the time of the action, so to a shogeg, unintentional sin, also had knowledge of the prohibition at the time of the prohibition, and that obviously would negate it, because then it's a wanton sin, then it's an intentional act. So he responded, indeed, yeah, that's a good point as well. That's what Munbaz responded to Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva said to him, wait. Well, then it's no longer an unintentional act. Then it's an intentional act, and it's a mazid. Katanimia, so that's the end of that discussion. So Katanimia, Ketzad, Tinuk, it says, what's the case of the Brisa says, what's the case of our Mishnah? And it says a child raised amongst non-Jews, meaning a child raised without the knowledge of Shabbos. So that works well according to Rav and Shmuel. But according to Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, kasha, that's a good question. Amri Lacha, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish saying, Lemi Ika Mumbaz. Don't we have Mumbaz who disagrees? So we follow Mumbaz's opinion. The Potter Anan Damrina Mumbaz. We too follow Mumbaz who says that there has to have been some sort of knowledge in order for it to be a chatas offer. Obligated a chatas offer. Tomorrow we'll continue. The Gemara is going to tell us what's the basis of Mumbaz's teaching.